Imagine a world where people paused for just a moment before reacting with anger, judgment, or indifference and instead chose kindness. How different would our lives look? How many broken hearts could be mended? How many lonely souls could feel seen? And how many lives could be changed by a single word or gesture of compassion? Kindness may seem simple, but in reality, it is one of the most powerful forces we have. It is the invisible thread that connects us, the spark that can turn despair into hope, and the quiet strength that can outlast pain, bitterness, and fear. The truth is, kindness is often forgotten in today's fast-paced world. We are all rushing, chasing deadlines, scrolling endlessly, competing for attention, and sometimes, without even noticing, we let impatience and coldness take the place of empathy. But kindness is more than just a polite word or a smile in passing. It is an act of courage. It is a conscious choice to see others, to value them, and to lift them up when they need it most. In this video, we are going to explore the true power of kindness, not just as a feel-good idea, but as something that can transform lives in profound ways. You will hear stories of ordinary people who made extraordinary impacts, not through wealth, status, or fame, but through compassion. And along the way, we will see why kindness is not weakness, it is strength. It is the kind of strength that leaves a legacy long after words fade and memories dim. Maybe you have had days when life felt heavy, when the world seemed indifferent to your struggles. And then out of nowhere someone offered you a smile, a helping hand, or words of encouragement. You remember those moments, do not they stay with us? They remind us that, despite everything, humanity is still alive, still beautiful. That is the power of kindness. It costs nothing, yet it is priceless. So as you watch this story unfold, I invite you to reflect on your own life. Who has shown you kindness when you needed it most? And more importantly, who is waiting right now for kindness from you? Because sometimes, the smallest gesture, a kind word, a listening ear, or even a gentle presence can make the biggest difference. If this message speaks to you, I would love for you to join our community here. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might need encouragement today. Together, we can spread kindness far beyond what we can imagine, creating ripples that touch lives in ways we may never fully know. Let us begin this journey and see how something as simple as kindness can become the most powerful act of all. It was a quiet night, the kind where the city seems half asleep, and only a few lights glow against the darkness. A driver, weary from hours on the road, pulled up outside a modest building at 2:30 in the morning. Normally, drivers might honk, wait briefly, and then move on if no one came out quickly. But something told him not to leave. Instead, he walked up to the door and knocked gently. After a pause, a frail voice answered, and slowly the door opened to reveal an elderly woman, her figure fragile but dignified, standing with a small suitcase by her side. She asked softly if he could carry her bag, and he not only lifted it for her but also offered his arm, guiding her carefully down the steps. She kept thanking him for his kindness, and he replied that he simply tried to treat passengers as he would want his own mother to be treated. When they got into the cab, she gave him an address but then asked for something unusual. She wanted to drive through downtown even though it was not the shortest route. She explained gently that she was on her way to a hospice and was in no hurry. The driver, moved by the weight of her words, turned off the meter without saying a word. He realized this journey was not about getting from one place to another, but about something much deeper. For the next 2 hours, he became a quiet companion to her memories. They passed by buildings that once shaped her life, the workplace, where she had been an elevator operator, the neighborhood where she and her husband had started their lives together. The old ballroom that had been filled with music and laughter when she was young. At times, she asked him to slow down in front of a certain place, and she would fall into silence, her eyes fixed on the darkness outside the window. He did not ask questions. He simply let her hold on to those moments, as if each stop gave her one last chance to say goodbye to the life she had lived. As dawn began to touch the horizon, she finally whispered that she was ready. They drove in silence to the hospice, a low building where 2 attendants were already waiting for her, their movements careful and respectful. The driver carried her suitcase inside, and she was gently settled into a wheelchair. Before parting, she asked how much she owed him. He shook his head, telling her she owed nothing. She insisted he had to make a living, but he quietly told her there would be other passengers. Almost without thinking, he bent down and hugged her. She clung to him with surprising strength for someone so frail, thanking him for giving her a little joy in her final days. He walked back into the morning light, the sound of the closing door echoing in his mind like the ending of a chapter. For the rest of the day, he drove aimlessly, unable to shake the thought of what had just happened. He realized that perhaps in all his years behind the wheel, this was the most important trip he had ever taken. What if he had been impatient? What if he had honked and driven away? What if she had been met with indifference instead of care? The thought stayed with him, teaching him that the true measure of life often hides in moments that seem small at the time, but carry extraordinary meaning later. This story is not simply about a ride in a taxi. It is about the dignity every person deserves, especially in their most vulnerable moments. It shows us how one person's decision to slow down and extend compassion can transform the end of another person's journey. The driver could have treated her as just another fare, but instead, he chose to treat her with honor, offering her not only transportation but also companionship, understanding, and respect. And in doing so, he gave her a final gift, the chance to relive her memories, to revisit her life, and to feel that she was not forgotten. There is something profoundly human in this kind of kindness. It reminds us that we all carry the ability to make someone else's burden lighter, even if only for a short while. It shows that kindness does not have to be grand or spectacular. Sometimes it is as simple as taking time, listening, and being present. We often underestimate how deeply a gesture can touch another soul. To the driver, it was just a choice to walk to the door, to wait, to listen, and to drive where she asked. But to her, it was everything. It was comfort, connection, and closure. The beauty of this story is that it lingers long after the ride ended. For the driver, it became a moment of clarity, a reminder of what truly matters. For those who hear it, it becomes an invitation to look at their own lives and consider how many chances for kindness pass by unnoticed. Too often, we get caught up in our own schedules and frustrations, failing to see that the person in front of us might be in desperate need of compassion. This woman's journey was not just her story. It became a lesson for all of us. It teaches us to ask, are we willing to pause, to notice, and to give, even when it seems inconvenient? As the driver reflected on what had happened, he understood that it was not wealth or status or great achievements that defined the value of his life. It was this simple act of kindness, this willingness to be there for someone else in their final hours, that gave meaning to his work and his days. And is not that true for all of us? When everything else fades, what remains is how we made people feel, how we lifted them when they were weak, and how we offered dignity when they needed it most. The story of that night endures because it reveals a truth we too often forget. Kindness has the power to transform not just the one who receives it but also the one who gives it. It can turn an ordinary day into a memory that lives forever. It can make us realize that the smallest choices sometimes carry the greatest weight. And most importantly, it reminds us that even in a world that often feels cold and hurried, the act of slowing down and showing compassion can be the difference between despair and peace, between being forgotten and being seen. This journey to the hospice was not just her last trip. It was a testament to the quiet strength of human kindness. As the cab moved slowly through the quiet streets, the city seemed to open itself like a memory book, each corner and building holding fragments of a life that was nearing its end. The woman sat in the back seat, her small frame almost hidden by the shadows, yet her presence filled the car with an unspoken weight. She had asked the driver to take the long way, to pass through downtown, to wander past places that had once been the backdrop of her story. There was no rush, no urgency to arrive, because this journey was not about a destination. It was about farewell. With every turn, she guided the driver toward landmarks that had shaped her youth, her love, her work, her laughter. They drove past the tall brick building where she had once worked as an elevator operator, a job she had taken in her younger years when she was full of energy and the world seemed vast with possibilities. She leaned slightly forward as if trying to catch one more glimpse of the windows, one more trace of the days when her hands pulled levers and she greeted strangers with a polite smile. For the driver, it was just a building, old and unremarkable, but to her, it was a place where she had once belonged, where the rhythm of her daily life had echoed between the floors she carried people to and from. Then she asked him to take her to the neighborhood where she and her husband had first lived together. The streets were quiet at that hour, but as they rolled slowly through, her eyes softened with memories of evenings spent walking hand in hand, of doors once open to neighbors who shared laughter over simple meals, of moments that had seemed ordinary at the time but were now treasures she carried within her. She did not say much, but the silence itself spoke volumes. The driver could feel that every street was alive for her, every corner pulling her back to a time when she was not alone. At one point, she asked him to stop in front of a wide warehouse that, to the driver's eyes, looked plain and unimportant, but her voice carried a hint of awe as she explained that it had once been a ballroom. It was there that she had spent evenings twirling across the polished floor, her dress sweeping gracefully as music lifted her into moments of pure joy. She remembered the laughter, the sound of violins, the warmth of youth when every dance seemed to promise a bright future. She stared quietly at the empty building, and though its windows were dark and its purpose long gone, in her mind it still glowed with light and music. The car moved from place to place, and sometimes she simply asked him to slow down, not to stop but just to linger for a moment. She would stare out into the night, saying nothing, her eyes reflecting lights that flickered like ghosts of the past. The driver did not interrupt. He understood instinctively that she was not just looking at buildings. She was saying goodbye to chapters of her life, chapters that no one else would remember if she did not take this last tour. Each place was more than a memory, it was a farewell to the pieces of herself that had been left behind over the decades. The journey stretched on until the faint glow of dawn began to edge into the sky. The first light of morning painted the streets, and she finally leaned back, her voice soft but steady as she said she was ready. Ready to leave the city she had once known so well, ready to let go of the past, ready to face what lay ahead. The driver did not need to ask more. He simply drove her in silence to the hospice, the streets slowly brightening around them as though the world itself was bowing gently to her exit. For the driver, this was no ordinary ride. He felt that he had been entrusted with something sacred, something that stretched far beyond the duty of transporting a passenger. He had been given the honor of holding space for someone's last journey through memory, of helping her say farewell to a lifetime in the quiet hours before daybreak. It struck him deeply that the places which meant nothing to him were the most precious treasures to her. Proof that every life carries worlds of meaning hidden in plain sight. When they finally arrived at the hospice, the attendants were waiting, prepared to receive her with care. But as the driver carried her suitcase and watched her being settled into the wheelchair, he realized that this journey through the city had been far more than a drive. It had been a ceremony, a closing ritual for a woman who had lived fully and now was leaving with dignity. The last sights she had chosen to see were not grand monuments or famous landmarks, but the quiet places where her story had unfolded, where she had worked, loved, and dreamed. The experience lingered with him long after the door closed behind her. He kept thinking about how easily he could have missed it. If he had chosen impatience that night, if he had decided her request for a longer route was inconvenient, he would never have witnessed this profound moment of farewell. He realized that in honoring her wish to revisit the places of her life, he had given her something priceless, the comfort of leaving her world with peace in her heart. And perhaps, in return, she had given him a gift just as great, the awareness that life is not measured by speed or efficiency, but by the meaning we create and share. Watching her gaze at the buildings of her past, he learned that kindness sometimes means simply slowing down, listening, and letting someone else hold on to what matters most before they let go. It was not only her farewell to life, it became his awakening to the truth that every person carries stories worth honoring. And sometimes, the greatest act of kindness is to give them the space to tell those stories one last time. There are moments in life when the simplest of choices carry a weight far greater than we can imagine. And it is in these quiet, unassuming acts that the true essence of humanity often reveals itself. On what was meant to be the last journey of an elderly woman, bound for the hospice where her final days would be spent, the driver tasked with transporting her faced such a choice. He could have driven straight there, following the usual routine with little thought beyond the destination. But instead, he paused and chose something else. He chose kindness. He chose to see her not just as a passenger in the back seat, but as a person whose story still mattered. Even in her closing chapter, that decision changed everything. Not only for her but for everyone who hears the story and realizes how easily indifference might have robbed her of this final gift. As they traveled, the woman spoke softly, almost hesitantly, about the places in the city that had been important to her. She mentioned the street where she once lived as a young wife, the church where she had stood in her wedding gown, the park where her children had played when they were small, and the corner cafe where she had often sat with her late husband, sharing coffee and laughter. These were not just locations on a map, they were pieces of her soul, threads of memory woven into the fabric of her identity. The driver, moved by her words and sensing the unspoken longing behind them, gently asked if she would like to see those places one more time before heading to the hospice. Her eyes filled with light, and she whispered yes. What followed was no longer a routine drive, but a journey through the landscape of a life well lived. As the car slowed by the little house with faded paint, she smiled and spoke of how she and her husband had painted it themselves one summer afternoon, dripping with sweat yet laughing at their clumsy brushstrokes. At the church, she gazed at the old stone walls, remembering the vows made decades ago, vows she had carried in her heart long after her husband had passed. When they reached the park, she grew quiet, watching the children playing, as though her own were still there, their laughter echoing in her memory. At the cafe, she sighed, not in sadness but in gratitude, for those moments of ordinary joy that had made her life extraordinary. The driver did not rush her. He did not look at his watch or remind her of the schedule. He simply drove, stopped, and waited, letting her linger as long as she wished at each place. It was a gift of time and respect, something so small on the surface but immense in its meaning. For the woman, These visits were not just farewells to places. They were acknowledgments that her life had mattered, that her memories had weight, and that someone cared enough to honor them. The kindness of one man transformed what could have been a silent, somber drive into a final chapter filled with warmth and dignity. It is easy to imagine how different this story might have been, had the driver been indifferent, had he ignored her words or dismissed her wishes. The journey would have been little more than a transition from one building to another, stripping away any chance for reflection or closure. The woman would have arrived at the hospice quietly, her memories tucked away unspoken, her final hours shadowed by the coldness of routine. But instead, because of one small choice, her journey became a celebration of life, a chance to revisit the places that had shaped her, a moment of joy in the face of inevitable farewell. The beauty of this story lies not only in what it meant for her, but in the reminder it offers to all of us. Every day, we are presented with choices, some so small that we barely notice them, yet their impact can ripple far beyond what we imagine. A kind word, a patient gesture, a willingness to listen, all these can transform another person's experience in ways we may never fully understand. Kindness is not about grand gestures or costly sacrifices. It is about recognizing the humanity in each other and responding with compassion instead of indifference. For the driver, that day may have passed like any other, the memory blending into the flow of his daily work. But for the woman, it was everything. It was the difference between being carried silently toward an end and being given the dignity to close her story with gratitude and peace. And for us, hearing it now, it is a call to notice the moments in our own lives where we might make that same choice, when we are tempted to rush, to look away, to keep moving without thought. Perhaps we can remember this story and realize that a small act of kindness might be the thing that gives someone else the joy they need most. In a world that often feels fast, distracted, and indifferent, the reminder could not be more important. Each of us carries the power to shape another person's day, or even their final memories, simply by choosing to care. And that, in the end, is what gives life its deepest meaning. There is a quiet, almost imperceptible weight that comes with holding on to anger, resentment, or grudges. A weight that settles deep within the chest and seeps into the corners of the mind until it shapes the way we live, the way we speak, and the way we see the world. For the driver who had just accompanied the elderly woman on her final journey, that realization came slowly, as he reflected on what he had witnessed and experienced during that unforgettable night, watching her revisit the streets of her life, hearing her stories of love, work, and simple joys. He understood that no amount of bitterness could ever give back those precious moments she had cherished. And likewise, no act of resentment could ever restore them once they were gone. What remained, then, is what truly matters: the small, deliberate choices we make to act with compassion, to offer kindness where we can, and to let go of the hurts that bind us to pain. Kindness, he realized, is not merely about polite manners or pleasant interactions. It is a liberation of the soul. To choose kindness is to free oneself from the shackles of resentment, to let go of the need to punish, to correct, or to seek revenge. Every moment spent dwelling on past injuries, every thought that lingers on who wronged us or how we were treated unfairly, tightens a chain around the heart, constricting it until even joy and gratitude struggle to breathe. And yet, the simple act of kindness, whether toward a stranger, a friend, or even toward oneself, can break that chain, allowing the heart to expand with compassion and understanding. The driver, thinking back to the way the elderly woman had smiled at him, how she had allowed herself a brief moment of joy despite her impending farewell, felt the truth of this more deeply than ever. Holding on to negativity harms the holder far more than the object of the resentment. And kindness, even small gestures, restores balance and peace to the spirit. It is a lesson that reaches far beyond the cab and the streets of the city. We carry stories of hurt, disappointment, and betrayal, sometimes layered one upon the other until they form invisible walls around our hearts. There is a natural instinct to protect oneself, to hold on to grievances as a shield, as though keeping score could prevent further harm. Yet, as the driver pondered the woman's quiet dignity and the way she had allowed herself to experience joy on that night, he realized that a life constrained by bitterness is a life half-lived. She had no time to waste on anger. She had only memories, and the power to relive them one last time through kindness extended to her. That choice to embrace what was gentle, to accept care without resistance, and to engage with the world softly was a freedom that bitterness could never provide. Kindness is also a ripple, affecting far more than the immediate moment or person. The driver, carrying the woman to the hospice, found himself transformed by her presence and her stories. Her openness and acceptance of a small act of assistance left an impression that would stay with him long after the meter had been turned off and the city had resumed its normal rhythm. He recognized that the act of letting go of resentment, of choosing to engage positively, can create a cascade of influence that touches lives in ways we cannot foresee. When we offer a hand, a word of encouragement, or simply our attention without judgment, we are not only lifting the other person, but also releasing ourselves from the invisible bonds that resentment imposes. This understanding extended into the small, ordinary interactions of daily life as well. The driver began to see the subtle moments where grudges or past slights could poison relationships or stunt growth, and how acts of kindness, no matter how modest, had the power to counteract them. A smile offered to someone who looks wary, a patient conversation with a colleague who frustrates us, a listening ear for a friend weighed down by problems. These are not trivial gestures. They are the antidotes to the quiet corrosion that resentment fosters. Each act of kindness frees the giver as much as the receiver, allowing the heart to remain open, flexible, and capable of connection, even in a world that often seems cold or indifferent. As he reflected further, he understood that kindness does not require grand displays or heroic measures. It does not ask for recognition, reward, or status. It is a quiet choice made repeatedly, often unnoticed, that accumulates over time to form a life of purpose and meaning. The elderly woman's journey through the city was a profound illustration of this truth. The driver's simple decision to stop, to listen, and to honor her memories was an act of kindness that elevated her final hours from mere survival to a celebration of life itself. Had he been impatient, indifferent, or resentful of the delay, her journey would have been reduced to a sterile, unremarkable passage from one place to another. Instead, the choice to act kindly created a space for dignity, reflection, and peace, showing that our actions carry weight far beyond the immediate moment. Ultimately, the story teaches that holding on to anger or grudges is a form of self-imprisonment. It binds us to negativity, narrows our perception, and limits the experiences we allow ourselves to have. Kindness, on the other hand, opens the heart and mind, allowing us to witness the fullness of human experience and to participate in the shared joy, sorrow, and beauty of life. It is a conscious decision to let go of what harms us internally and to engage with the world in a way that fosters healing, understanding, and connection. The elderly woman's final ride through the city became a powerful testament to this truth, illustrating vividly that kindness liberates, while bitterness confines, and that the choices we make in moments both ordinary and extraordinary define not only the lives of those around us, but also the state of our own hearts. In the end, the driver carried this lesson forward: that life is too short to be weighed down by resentment, that every opportunity to show compassion matters, and that by choosing kindness, we free ourselves to experience the world fully, to connect deeply, and to leave a legacy of grace that endures long after the moments have passed. It is through these deliberate acts, small though they may seem, that hearts are lightened, lives are uplifted, and the simple yet profound power of kindness is revealed in its truest form. It is often the smallest gestures that carry the greatest weight, the quietest words that resonate the deepest, and the simplest expressions of care that can leave a lasting imprint on someone's heart. The driver, reflecting on the night he spent accompanying the elderly woman through the city, realized that kindness was not just about action, it was also about communication, about the power of words to comfort, inspire, and heal in ways that cannot always be seen. The woman's soft voice, the way she thanked him repeatedly, the gratitude that radiated from her for what might have seemed to him ordinary acts of assistance, revealed a profound truth. Words, when spoken with sincerity, have the capacity to touch the soul and restore a sense of meaning in moments of vulnerability. Throughout that night, the woman recounted memories that spanned decades, speaking of places that had shaped her life, of people she had loved and lost, of joys and sorrows that had left their mark. Each recollection was met with attentive listening and gentle acknowledgement from the driver. But it was not just his actions that mattered, it was the acknowledgement itself. The subtle affirmations that she mattered, that her story was seen and heard. In these exchanges, the driver witnessed the transformative power of encouragement, of kind words that carry more than politeness, that carry recognition, respect, and empathy. A single phrase, a gentle affirmation, or even the act of listening with presence can give someone permission to feel seen, to feel validated, and to embrace their own worth, even in moments when life feels heavy and unforgiving. The concept extends beyond the confines of that night and the specific journey they shared. Every person carries wounds, many of them invisible, shaped by years of experience, loss, misunderstanding, or neglect. Some are scars from broken relationships, others from unfulfilled dreams, and still others from the subtle, persistent effects of isolation or indifference. What we may perceive as casual words, the simple "I see you," "I appreciate you," or "I am proud of you," can become beacons of hope in someone's life, illuminating paths forward that had seemed obscured by doubt or despair. The driver had not needed to offer grand declarations. It was enough to engage with presence, attentiveness, and respectful acknowledgement, and in doing so, he contributed to the woman's sense of being valued at a moment when the world might otherwise have overlooked her. Consider the moments in our own lives when a kind word, a supportive comment, or even a shared silence filled with understanding shifted something within us. Perhaps it gave us courage to face a daunting challenge, comfort in the face of grief, or reassurance in times of uncertainty. This is the invisible force the driver encountered that night. Words do not always need to be dramatic or commanding, they need only be sincere, intentional, and directed toward lifting another human being, recognizing their presence, and validating their experiences. In the case of the elderly woman, these exchanges, the soft words of gratitude, the attentive listening, the quiet conversation during pauses in the journey created a space for reflection, closure, and peace, offering her a sense of completion that might otherwise have remained elusive. Even in everyday interactions, the principle remains the same. Encouraging words can inspire someone to keep going when the world seems determined to push them down, can comfort someone whose struggles are invisible to the casual observer, and can heal wounds that have lain hidden, sometimes for years, They are a quiet form of intervention, a subtle yet powerful reminder that no one exists in isolation, that we are all connected through the simple acknowledgement of one another's humanity. When delivered with genuine care, words become more than communication. They become instruments of resilience, capable of reinforcing self-worth, rekindling hope, and reigniting the courage to continue moving forward. The driver's experience also illustrates the reciprocity of such moments. While his words, attentiveness, and actions uplifted the woman, he himself was profoundly changed, witnessing her response, her gratitude, and the way a simple presence could bring her peace. He understood that encouragement is not a one-way gift. It transforms both the giver and the receiver. Sincere words of support expand empathy, cultivate patience, and awaken a deeper awareness of the unseen struggles carried by those around us. This dual effect reinforces the notion that kindness, in speech as in deed, is a practice that nourishes the heart of the speaker while simultaneously lifting the spirit of another. It is also worth noting that such expressions of care often require vulnerability. To speak with authenticity, to offer encouragement without expectation, and to acknowledge another person's life or struggles, demands attentiveness and courage. The driver, by choosing to focus on her needs rather than his schedule or convenience, created a rare moment in which the woman felt safe to share her memories and emotions. In that safety, she experienced healing. In that acknowledgement, she felt valued. And in that connection, the journey became more than a trip to a hospice. It became a sacred passage through which dignity, humanity, and recognition were preserved. In reflecting upon this experience, it becomes evident that words, small though they may seem, carry the power to transform reality. They can lift someone from despair, infuse courage into moments of hesitation, and mend aspects of the human spirit that might otherwise remain fractured. The elderly woman's journey demonstrated that when words are paired with compassion, attentiveness, and intentionality, they do not merely convey meaning, they create it. They validate life, honor memory, and offer hope, turning ordinary interactions into profound acts of healing. Ultimately, the story teaches that words are among the most powerful forms of kindness we possess. Encouraging words can spark change, restore confidence, and soothe hidden pain. They remind us that while actions are vital, the way we communicate, the tone we adopt, and the presence we bring can leave an indelible mark on another's heart. In the driver's quiet acts of acknowledgement, in the woman's gentle responses, we see the embodiment of this principle. Life is enriched, wounds are tended, and hearts are healed when we choose to speak with care, attention, and genuine kindness, recognizing the unseen struggles that surround us and offering words that carry the weight of hope, validation, and compassion. In the quiet hours of the night, as the city slept under a blanket of dim streetlights, the driver carried the elderly woman through streets that seemed ordinary yet were imbued with layers of memory and meaning for her. What struck him most profoundly was the way people conceal their struggles behind the facades of everyday life. Smiling politely, speaking softly, and moving through the world as if nothing burdens them. While inside, they carry invisible weights that are heavy and persistent. The woman, as he would come to understand, had lived a life filled with such hidden depths: loss, loneliness, and the inexorable passage of time, but she bore it with quiet grace. In her gentle voice and careful directions, he realized that beneath the surface of civility and routine, human hearts often harbor pain that is neither spoken of nor visible, yet it shapes every choice, every hesitation, every longing. Throughout their journey, the woman shared memories of her youth, of her family, and of the small joys that had marked her decades of life, each recollection interwoven with a subtle undercurrent of sorrow and nostalgia. She had no immediate family left, and the hospice awaited her as the final chapter of her story. Yet she spoke with a dignity that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. The driver, listening intently, began to comprehend how critical small acts of attention and kindness can be for those who carry such concealed pain. His willingness to slow down, to take the long route, to listen without interruption, and to offer assistance without hesitation became a source of comfort for her, a reassurance that her life and experiences still mattered, that someone recognized her worth and her story. The idea that a single encounter, a single act of empathy, could have such a profound impact is not confined to this one night. In the world around us, countless people hide their struggles behind smiles, suppressing fears and sorrows in order to navigate the demands of daily life. They may appear cheerful, even cheerful enough to lift the spirits of others, yet within them is a quiet, often unspoken, longing for understanding, for acknowledgement, and for the gentle reassurance that they are not alone. The driver's attentive presence served as a reminder that noticing these subtleties, the hesitation in a word, the glint of tears behind tired eyes, the subtle weight in someone's posture can provide opportunities to extend kindness in ways that may be invisible but are deeply felt. As they passed the neighborhood where the woman had first lived with her husband, she described the modest apartment with a hint of pride, recalling nights of laughter and mornings filled with hope. And though her voice was steady, the tenderness in her eyes betrayed a longing for those days gone by. The driver watched her closely, understanding that his simple engagement, the act of asking questions, slowing the car, and simply allowing her to relive these moments offered her something far greater than convenience. It offered emotional sustenance, a bridge between the present and the vivid, comforting memories of the past. In this way, a small gesture, a willingness to pay attention, became a lifeline, enabling her to move forward toward the next step in her journey with a sense of completion and peace rather than fear or isolation. The journey through the city became a metaphor for how kindness interacts with human struggle. Just as the streets guided them past places of significance, the driver's actions guided the woman through her final hours with dignity and respect, highlighting the subtle yet profound effect that empathy can have on someone navigating hidden pain. She had lived a life that was rich and full, yet tinged with loneliness in her final days. And yet the driver's presence, his gentle words, and his willingness to honor her wishes allowed her to confront her ending not as a solitary burden, but as a passage accompanied by understanding and human care. This realization impressed upon him that many people endure suffering quietly, yet the impact of a kind act can ripple through their lives, often in ways unseen, nurturing resilience, courage, and the capacity to keep moving forward. Moreover, the experience underscored the importance of being attentive to those whose pain is masked behind smiles or routine gestures. For the driver, recognizing the woman's vulnerability was as crucial as responding to it. A person's outward composure does not necessarily reflect the inner state of their heart. And it is precisely in these moments when the surface seems calm, but the interior may be stormy, that the subtle interventions of kindness and empathy matter most. A few words of encouragement, a patient gesture, a simple act of listening or offering help can reinforce the sense that someone is not alone, that their struggles are acknowledged, and that they are supported in continuing their journey, however difficult or painful it may be. By the time they reached the hospice, the first light of morning had begun to illuminate the city, casting long shadows across the streets they had traveled together. The woman's demeanor was calm, peaceful, and accepting, a stark contrast to what might have been an anxious, Fearful arrival had the driver chosen impatience or indifference. He realized that what seemed like a small, ordinary act, choosing to take the time to honor her wishes, to guide her through familiar streets, to listen and engage, had allowed her to approach the next chapter of her life with serenity and dignity. The smile she offered him as she was assisted into the building was not just a reflection of gratitude for his help. It was a testament to how attentiveness and kindness can sustain someone, even at moments when the weight of life and impending loss might otherwise feel unbearable. The story serves as a powerful reminder that behind the smiles of those we encounter may lie untold struggles, hidden wounds, unspoken fears, and that our actions, our words, and our attentiveness can become anchors that keep them moving forward. The elderly woman's final journey through the city demonstrated that when we choose empathy, patience, and genuine care, we offer more than assistance. We offer reassurance, comfort, and the sustaining power of human connection. By acknowledging the unseen battles of others and acting with intentional kindness, we create spaces where hope, courage, and perseverance can flourish, proving that even the simplest gestures can carry the strength to uplift hearts weighed down by the hidden burdens of life. It is often in the most unassuming moments that the power to transform a life quietly reveals itself, hidden within the cadence of a word, the tone of a voice, or the subtle affirmation of presence. And the driver, reflecting on the night he spent guiding the elderly woman through the streets of the city, came to understand this in the most profound way. The woman, who had spent decades carrying the weight of loss, change, and solitude, found in his attentive listening and gentle willingness to accommodate her wishes a reminder that life, even at its final stage, could be honored, recognized, and celebrated. And it was precisely these simple affirmations, his careful engagement, his patience, and his expressions of respect that prevented despair from taking hold, and instead encouraged a sense of dignity and purpose in her last hours. For anyone observing from afar, these may have appeared to be ordinary gestures, almost mundane in their execution, yet they carried an extraordinary capacity to reinforce the worth of a human being, to validate experiences, and to inspire a quiet hope that even the briefest human connection can make all the difference in one's willingness to face the next moment. As the car wound through familiar neighborhoods, the woman shared recollections of her youth, her work, her family, and the moments of joy and sorrow that had left indelible marks on her life. And the driver, mindful of the significance of her words, responded not with interruption or distraction, but with affirmations of attentiveness and acknowledgement. When she paused, lost in memory, he would nod, make eye contact through the rearview mirror, or ask gentle questions that invited her to continue, signaling that her voice was heard and that her life, with all its complexities and imperfections, mattered. This seemingly small act of engagement is the essence of how affirmations operate. They validate presence, they recognize effort, and they illuminate the intrinsic value of a person's experiences, often in ways that no material gesture could replicate. The woman's expression softened with each stop, each recollection, and each careful affirmation, as if the simple acknowledgement of her story and her presence was the balm that allowed her to approach the inevitable with grace rather than fear. It is easy to underestimate the influence of such moments in daily life. Most people navigate their days carrying private aspirations, silent fears, and concealed disappointments, often never vocalizing the dreams that propel them or the anxieties that threaten to hold them back. In these situations, the power of a simple affirmation, "I believe in you, you are valued, your life matters," can function as both shield and catalyst, offering protection against despair while simultaneously motivating forward movement toward one's goals, or even toward the simple fulfillment of daily purpose. in witnessing the elderly woman's response to his attention and gentle words. The driver saw how easily despair can be countered by the mindful acknowledgement of another person, and how affirmation can encourage even the most burdened spirit to engage with life with renewed dignity and courage. During the journey, the woman directed him to revisit places that had been pivotal to her existence. The modest apartment where she had lived with her husband, the church where significant milestones had been celebrated, the park where children's laughter had once filled the air, and the corner cafe that had witnessed countless ordinary yet meaningful moments. Each stop was accompanied not only by her narration but also by his deliberate recognition of her memories, his subtle gestures confirming that these remembrances were not trivial but profoundly important. In each of these moments, the affirming presence of the driver functioned as a kind of invisible support, a reinforcement of her worth, and a reminder that her life, her history, and her emotions were seen and respected, countering any sense of isolation or insignificance she might have felt. Even the simple act of conversation carries a transformative potential. The driver's attentive questions, his respectful silence during reflective pauses, and the warmth in his tone provided the woman with a rare space in which her story could be fully voiced, her emotions honored, and her memories relived with the recognition they deserved. This is the essence of affirmation. It can prevent despair from taking root, creating a sense of security and validation that empowers an individual to face challenges, confront endings, or pursue dreams that remain alive in the heart despite the passage of time. For the woman, this meant the chance to engage with her final journey in a manner that was meaningful and intentional, rather than rushed or overlooked. And it is a testament to the profound impact that careful acknowledgement and simple affirming words can have on the human spirit. Moreover, the story illustrates that affirmation is not solely about verbal statements, but encompasses the full spectrum of attentiveness, the willingness to adjust plans, the patience to accommodate another's pace, the acknowledgement of experiences through gestures or presence, and the consistent demonstration that another's life is valued. The driver's choice to slow the pace, to listen without hurry, and to honor the woman's wishes functioned as a sustained affirmation, reinforcing her dignity and enabling her to approach the final chapter of her life with a sense of fulfillment rather than resignation. It exemplifies how affirmation can shape the emotional landscape of another person, creating resilience, hope, and a motivation to face life's realities with courage and acceptance. Ultimately, the story teaches a powerful lesson. Affirmation, whether delivered through words, actions, or presence, has the capacity to prevent despair, inspire confidence, and motivate individuals to pursue their dreams or to approach their lives with renewed purpose. The elderly woman's final journey through the city was made profoundly richer because the driver engaged with her attentively and affirmingly, providing not only practical assistance but also a reinforcement of her value, her story, and her memories. It is a reminder that the impact of simple, intentional affirmations extends far beyond the immediate moment, sustaining hope, encouraging forward movement, and nurturing the human spirit in ways that can reverberate long after the encounter has ended. In the gymnasium where the driver had once spent countless hours playing basketball with friends, a quiet and unassuming young man began to appear, a presence so subtle that most of the regulars barely noticed him. Yet one could sense an aura of solitude clinging to him, a weight of isolation that seemed to define his every movement and gesture. His name was Boo, and from the first day he arrived, it was clear that he was unlike the others. He avoided conversation, kept his distance, and responded to attempts at engagement with a curt nod or a brief, almost imperceptible gesture, giving no indication of the thoughts and struggles that lay behind his guarded exterior. Many would have dismissed him, written him off as aloof or unfriendly, But the driver, guided by an instinctive sense that even small gestures can have profound consequences, chose to acknowledge him each time he entered the gym, greeting him warmly and making a subtle effort to make him feel seen. At first, Bo's responses were minimal, almost mechanical: a tap to the chest, a fleeting glance, a brief acknowledgement. But the driver persisted, speaking his name, offering a smile, and including him in the rhythm of the gym's daily activities without imposing or pressing. It was a quiet form of insistence, an unspoken promise that he mattered, that he was recognized, and that his presence, however silent or reserved, had value. Over time, these simple gestures of attention, encouragement, and consistency began to pierce the protective shell Bo had built around himself. Though he did not immediately speak or engage in meaningful conversation, there was a subtle shift in the way he carried himself. A recognition that the world could contain spaces where he was not only tolerated but genuinely acknowledged. The power of kindness, in this context, was invisible yet tangible, working quietly to affirm a young man's worth and to nurture the fragile seeds of confidence within him. As the weeks and months passed, the cumulative effect of these small acts of kindness became increasingly evident. Bo began to attend more regularly, his presence no longer defined solely by isolation but by a tentative willingness to participate, to observe, and eventually to contribute in small ways. The driver, without fanfare or expectation of immediate results, had created an environment where affirmation and recognition were freely offered, providing a safe space for a young man who had long felt unwanted, unseen, and disconnected from those around him. It was in these moments, where no one else noticed, that transformation quietly took root, demonstrating the profound ripple effects of attentiveness and encouragement when extended with sincerity and patience. Years passed, and the pattern of acknowledgement and kindness endured, even as both the driver and Bo moved into different phases of their lives. Who had once navigated the world with reticence and a profound sense of alienation, gradually evolved into someone capable of meaningful connection, someone who learned to trust and to see himself through the eyes of others who valued and respected him. The impact of simple gestures, the consistent recognition of his presence, the repeated affirmations that he mattered, the patience extended during moments of silence or hesitation catalyzed a broader transformation in his life, creating pathways for personal growth, emotional resilience, and the capacity to embrace relationships that had previously seemed unattainable. Eventually, Bo reconnected with the driver decades later, revealing a life that had been profoundly shaped by those early experiences of subtle yet persistent kindness. He shared stories of growing up in challenging circumstances, navigating periods of loneliness and rejection, and ultimately finding strength and purpose through the validation and encouragement he had received in a seemingly ordinary gym. The influence of those small acts had extended far beyond the moment itself, instilling in him a sense of self-worth, the courage to pursue goals that had once seemed unreachable, and the capacity to form a family grounded in love, respect, and recognition of each individual's intrinsic value. The young man who had once been a loner, hesitant to speak or engage, became a husband, a father, and a mentor, passing on the lessons of empathy, attention, and affirmation to his own children, shaping the next generation through the quiet power of human connection. The story of Bo illustrates a profound principle. The effects of kindness and acknowledgement often unfold over extended periods, manifesting in ways that are far greater than the immediate moment might suggest. By taking the time to recognize another person, to affirm their presence, and to offer consistent attention and encouragement, we plant seeds of resilience, hope, and transformation that can flourish across a lifetime. Bo's journey demonstrates that the smallest gestures, delivered with authenticity and care, can alter trajectories, heal hidden wounds, and provide the foundation for lives rich in connection, purpose, and fulfillment. Furthermore, the narrative emphasizes that transformation is rarely instantaneous or dramatic. It is cumulative, a product of repeated, deliberate choices to act with attention, empathy, and affirmation. Each smile, each greeting, each moment of patient acknowledgement contributes incrementally to the creation of an environment in which a vulnerable individual can begin to see their own worth, to believe in their potential, and to step into a life of engagement rather than withdrawal. The driver's persistence, his unwavering commitment to treat Bo with recognition and respect, underscores how enduring the influence of consistent kindness can be, shaping not only immediate experiences but also the long-term character, confidence, and relational capacity of another person. Ultimately, Bo's story ties seamlessly to the broader narrative of the elderly woman's journey. The lessons of attention, encouragement, and recognition that define the human experience, and the enduring power of kindness in shaping lives. Just as the elderly woman found dignity and peace through the attentive and affirming presence of the driver during her final journey, Bo's life was transformed through sustained, simple acts of recognition and care, illustrating that no person exists in isolation and that the thoughtful engagement of one individual can ripple outward, touching not only a life in the present but shaping the course of the future. In this way, the story affirms that kindness, acknowledgement, and encouragement are not merely courteous behaviors, they are transformative forces, capable of lifting spirits, healing wounds, and fostering the development of lives and families rooted in love, purpose, and resilience. As we reach the close of this story, it becomes clear that no encounter in life is ever truly accidental. Every interaction, every passing moment, and every opportunity to extend care or attention carries with it the potential to create a ripple that can transform lives in ways we may never fully realize. From the elderly woman whose last journey through the city was infused with dignity and warmth, to Bo, the young man whose life was quietly reshaped by simple acts of recognition and affirmation, we witness the profound truth that kindness is both intentional and far-reaching. These stories remind us that each decision to act with empathy, to pause and acknowledge someone, to speak a word of encouragement, or to offer a helping hand is never insignificant, and its effects may stretch far beyond the immediate moment, influencing futures, shaping families, and leaving legacies of compassion that endure long after the interaction has ended. The elderly woman, with her memories, her stories, and her quiet gratitude, demonstrated that even in the final chapter of life, being treated with care, attentiveness, and respect can restore a sense of meaning and fulfillment. The driver's choice to accompany her, to listen without hurry, and to honor her wishes transformed what could have been a lonely, hurried journey into an experience of shared humanity, recognition, and closure. His simple acts carrying her suitcase, taking her through familiar streets, and responding to her reflections with patience and presence were not monumental gestures in the conventional sense. Yet they provided her with dignity and a sense that her life mattered in the grand tapestry of human experience. Such moments reveal that kindness does not require grandiosity, it requires intention, attentiveness, and the willingness to place another person's needs, however briefly, alongside our own. Similarly, the story of Bo illuminates how small, consistent acts of affirmation can have far-reaching effects on a life that may seem unnoticed or unremarkable at first glance. A quiet greeting, a nod of recognition, A word of encouragement. These seemingly minor gestures created a foundation upon which Bo could begin to see his own value, to engage with the world around him, and eventually to build a life filled with connection, family, and purpose. What appears minor in the moment may, in fact, be monumental when measured against the arc of someone's life. The patience and intentionality of the driver allowed a lonely young man to gradually cultivate self-worth, trust, and resilience, demonstrating that the smallest encounters, when handled with care, can catalyze transformations that reverberate across decades. These examples reinforce the idea that the world is connected through countless unseen threads of influence, and that our choices in how we respond to others matter more than we might imagine. In every glance, every word, every gesture, there lies a potential for impact and opportunity to lift someone from despair, to instill hope, to inspire action, or simply to make someone feel acknowledged, valued, and understood. In an age where life moves rapidly and interactions can feel fleeting, it is worth remembering that these small choices are never trivial. They carry with them the power to change trajectories, to heal wounds, and to foster a sense of belonging that the human spirit longs for. As you reflect on these stories, consider the encounters in your own life, the moments when someone has smiled, their words, or their attentiveness brightened your day, or when your own actions provided comfort or reassurance to another. Life presents us continuously with opportunities to make a difference, and it is through conscious engagement, empathy, and the willingness to act with kindness that we contribute to the world in meaningful ways. Whether it is through carrying a suitcase for a stranger, offering a heartfelt compliment, or simply acknowledging the presence of someone who feels overlooked, each choice to extend compassion adds to a collective impact that can be seen, felt, and remembered long beyond the moment itself. Ultimately, the lesson these stories impart is one of hope, agency, and responsibility. We are never powerless in the lives of others. Even small, deliberate actions can create legacies of care and connection. The elderly woman's serene final journey, Bo's transformative path from isolation to belonging, and countless other moments like them illustrate that the human heart responds to acknowledgement, affirmation, and love. By choosing to act with kindness in every interaction, we contribute to a tapestry of positive influence that can shape destinies, nurture resilience, and inspire generations. Every smile, every word of encouragement, every act of service is a thread that strengthens the bonds of humanity and leaves a lasting imprint on the world. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story. And if it touched your heart or inspired you in any way, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the power of kindness and human connection. May you go forward carrying these lessons in your own life, and may the small acts of care you extend today ripple far beyond what you can see. From our hearts to yours, thank you, and good night, sleep well, and may your dreams be filled with compassion, hope, and the enduring joy of making a difference in someone else's life.